This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, and welcome to Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, the Dream Coach. This is a show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love. As we all know, it's almost impossible to dream, at very least remember our dreams, if our sleep cycles are disrupted. And one of the biggest reasons for this happening is stress. Frankly, we're all under a lot of stress now, perhaps even more than ever, with worries about health, finances, and even the future itself on everyone's minds. What can we do about it? Maybe more than you think. We're going to discuss this with my guest, Dr. Greg Hammer. Greg is a pediatric physician, a professor at Stanford University, and the author of the new book, Gain Without Pain, the Happiness Handbook for Healthcare Professionals. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Greg.
Great to be with you.
Oh, thank you. Greg, you wrote this book mainly for doctors and nurses, and it's especially timely now as every one of us is seeing firsthand the incredible stress they're under. But before we get into that, as a doctor, I'd like to ask your understanding of why stress is so harmful to us.
Sure. Well, one might consider two kinds of stress. The first is acute stress. So that would be what we might experience if we're being chased by a bear, for example. And acute stress causes our circulating epinephrine, also called adrenaline levels, to go up. And that increases our heart rate and blood pressure. It increases the amount of blood that our heart is pumping. And it also increases the cortisol in our blood, which causes an increase in our blood sugar, for example. So those things might be considered adaptive in situations of acute stress. But when the stress lasts for days or weeks or months or even longer, this is really maladaptive. So it's maladaptive, harmful to have elevated levels of adrenaline in our body, elevated levels of cortisol in our body. And these cause significant adverse changes in our physiology. For example, the adrenaline, of course, causes a strain on our heart and circulation. It also causes hypertension, for example, and definitely interferes with our sleep. The cortisol level, when chronically elevated, as opposed to elevated for only a short period of time, suppresses our immune system. So that plus the interference with our sleep makes us more susceptible to infection, obviously a special concern right now. And also, chronic stress causes changes in our body that are very similar to aging. So, for example, we have little protective caps at the end of our chromosomes, which regulate our body cellular functions. These little caps are called telomeres. And we know that when we age, these telomeres become shorter and less protective of our chromosomes. So one might think of our telomeres as being akin to the little tape-like structures at the end of our shoelaces that keep the shoelace ends from fraying and becoming damaged. And when these telomeres degrade, it is harmful to our chromosomes and the genetic material in our cells. And this happens when we age, but it also happens related to chronic stress. So, in other words, chronic stress causes adverse changes in our cardiovascular system, our immune system, and overall contributes to changes in our body that are akin to aging.
So, anecdotally, I could kind of vouch for that because there are times when, I'm on retreats and I get incredibly relaxed and get rid of all kinds of stress that I have. And one of the things that people say is, boy, Debbie, you look a lot younger. So I could say there's a lot of truth to that. But are there any types of people who are more vulnerable to stress than others?
That's an excellent question. I think that people who have other health problems would be more at risk for an exacerbation of those problems related to stress. So people who already have high blood pressure or who already have diabetes or pre-diabetes where their blood sugar tends to be elevated. People who have immune disorders, who are immunocompromised by virtue of an internal or some other process. So, I would include the elderly as well, perhaps the very young, and actually that seems a little bit strange, but in fact, children are being stressed right now as well. So, but I would say those with pre-existing conditions and the elderly would be at particular risk.
Okay, so you have devised a method for dealing with stress called GAIN, which is the Gain Without Pain title of your book.
Yes.
Can you tell me what the letters stand for and how this works to reduce stress?
Sure. Well, I think that the 4 pillars of resilience, and therefore the ability to be present and happy, are represented by the 4 letters in GAIN, the acronym GAIN. And those would be gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. And we can talk about those individually, but I really think that embracing those 4 principles will potentially lead us to become more present, resilient, and happy. For example, with gratitude, I think gratitude is central to many doctrines with respect to being happy in life. And in my book, I say that you can be blind and happy, you can be deaf and happy, you can have other physical disabilities and be happy, but I think we can all appreciate that you cannot be happy if you are not grateful. So gratitude clearly is a mainstay of happiness. Acceptance is another really important principle because we really need to be able to discern between things we can change and things we can't change. And I think that's the core of the Serenity Prayer, for example. So when we are stressed out because the world doesn't comport with our view or how we would like things to be, let's consider whether these are things we can change or not. And if we can't change them, let's just sit and open our hearts and accept the way things are. We didn't necessarily cause them to be that way. We're not going to cure them from being that way. Let's just open our heart, let these feelings in, which may be a little bit uncomfortable at first, but when we resist, the pain persists. So let's open our heart and practice acceptance. The I in GAIN stands for intention. And what I mean by that is that by using our purposefulness or intention, we can actually rewire our brains. We can change the way we think from our usual negativity bias to a more positive outlook. And an excellent example of that is a program at Duke University called 3 Good Things. And the practice is very simple. So when you're preparing to go to sleep at night, putting on your pajamas or turning down the bed, think of 3 good things that happened during the day. The fact is, our usual practice is to take stock of our day and think of things that didn't go as planned or didn't go well. And simply by thinking of 3 good things at the end of the day actually helps all of us sleep better and be happier people. So that's an example how we can use our intention to change the way we think. And even at ages over 30, 40, 50, 60, we do have the ability, because our brains remain somewhat plastic or modifiable, we have the ability to actually influence our thought processes. So we talked about gratitude, acceptance, intention, and the N in GAIN stands for non-judgment. I think we can all relate to the fact that our minds are usually quite busy comparing things one to another, ourselves to others, categorizing everything as being good or bad or too big, too small, and it's actually rather exhausting. And as an alternative, we can just simply be non-judgmental. That is, we don't have to categorize everything as good or bad. We can just contemplate the way things are without judgment. And we're all particularly adept at judging ourselves. And again, our negativity bias creeps in and we tend to judge ourselves harshly. So let's, for example, do a cognitive behavioral exercise and just pretend we're talking to our best friend. And our best friend is telling us about how they're judging themselves. Our natural response would be to reassure them, you're a good guy, or you're a lovely woman, you mean the best, and you have great intentions, and don't judge yourself. Don't judge yourself harshly at all. If we can use the same reflection to ourselves and just accept the way things are with ourselves and the world, and without judgment, we will be happier. So those are the 4 principles of gain, and I think those are core principles with respect to being present, resilient, and happy.
Mm-hmm. So if you're full of stress right now, would you have to embrace all 4 principles to get benefit?
Well, I think that they're all interrelated. And, in my life, I teach meditation to medical students, residents, fellows, and faculty. And I teach them the GAIN meditation, which I do every morning. So I recommend getting up 3 minutes earlier than you would normally, opening the shades, doing your hygiene thing, and then sitting in a comfortable place with your eyes closed, focusing on the breath. And then there's a contemplation of these 4 principles, and then an opening of the eyes, and we're ready to go out in the world. And we can practice each of these principles periodically throughout the day. So the answer to your question is the 4 are kind of interrelated. I would recommend, focusing on one at a time if you'd like, or certainly I recommend starting the day with a GAIN meditation where you do kind of go through a contemplation of all 4 principles. But then during the day, you can just pick one. Say, today I'm going to practice non-judgment. So I can tell you that I ride my bike to work. I'm very grateful for living on Stanford campus where I work and teach and practice medicine. And as I'm riding my bike to work, I pass through a beautiful tree-covered lane, which is narrow and quiet. And there's often a person on the path, perhaps walking in the same direction I'm riding my bike. And as I get closer to them, I see that they have buds in their ears. And then I notice that they're looking at their screen and they're standing, walking in the middle of the path. And I start to form judgments about these things. And as soon as I do that, I remember that I was going to practice non-judgment today. So I remind myself, let go of those judgments. You don't know anything about this person. There's nothing good or bad about what this person is doing. And as I pass that individual, I look at them with a smile and they smile back at me. And it was a pleasant experience. So I've turned what would be kind of an unpleasant, judgmental encounter into a pleasant interaction with another lovely human being. So again, you can pick one of the GAIN elements at a time and say, today I'm going to focus on this, or the first person I see, I'm going to be grateful, or I'm going to be non-judgmental, etc. So yeah, you can certainly pick and choose.
And so you're saying that just by practicing that will just decrease your own stress?
Well, absolutely, because, if you think about when our happiest moments, they are when we are present, right here, right now. So when you're with somebody that you love, embracing, you sort of stop worrying about the past and the future, and you become present. You join with the other person, perhaps. Or you're just watching a miraculous rainbow, or you're at the beach focused on the waves, or listening to a beautiful piece of music, or gazing at a beautiful piece of art. You find that you're present. And when we're present, we are happy. And I think we can all relate to that. When we are obsessing on the past and the future, we're often unhappy. And again, our negativity bias creeps in. So we're thinking about the past. Our thoughts are full of regret and shame. I wish I hadn't done that. I'm embarrassed about this. Or we're obsessing about the future, which is especially common, I think, right now during this awful pandemic. And we tend to imagine the worst case scenario, and we have fear and anxiety, and we catastrophize. So by going back to these GAIN principles, I think what we find is that it helps us refocus our energy and our thought processes on the present. Because again, when we're grateful, we're happy and we're present. And similarly with acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. So I think these 4 principles do work together to help us kind of let go of the maladaptive obsession with thoughts of the past and future, which are often uncomfortable and negative.
So therefore, the key is to really focus on the present.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that resonates with all of us, that when we're present, we're feeling more resilient and happier.
Hmm. Well, I tell you, I can certainly vouch for the gratitude part of your method. I am very, very lucky to be living in the country, in upstate New York, right? And I'm sitting on a hill with this beautiful panoramic view of rolling hills. And now that spring has come, new greenery's showing up every day, and the birds are coming back, and all that lovely thing. And I am so grateful to be here. Like, if I have to be stuck any place, what a wonderful place to be stuck. And that's really been keeping me going through all these weeks. I can certainly see how practicing gratitude can be a wonderful stress reducer.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think, even if we don't live in a beautiful bucolic area as you do, and I do, as a matter of fact, in obviously different environment here, but also very lovely, we can all think back, maybe watch some YouTube videos and learn about the great influenza pandemic of 1918. And we can be grateful that we have things so much better now. So again, focusing on what we have rather than what we don't have. And 100 years ago, during the flu pandemic, there was very little, if any, healthcare available. All of the systems in terms of keeping the streets clean, of food access to medications, ability to communicate with other people and stay abreast of what's happening, those things were basically non-existent. And in fact, they didn't even have the wherewithal to collect dead bodies, of which there were many in lots of our cities and elsewhere. And there weren't enough caskets, there weren't enough burial sites. So we have things so much better now. Just the idea that you're there in upstate New York and I'm here on the West Coast, and we're able to look at each other and appreciate each other's company and, stay in touch. Even if we're physically isolated, we don't have to be socially isolated. So we have so many tools that our forebears 100 years ago did not have. And so I think we can all be grateful. As bad as things are, let's remember how much worse they could be, and they have been in the past.
It's always much better to focus on the positive. And with that, we're going to be taking a short break. We're speaking with Dr. Greg Hammer about stress, and we'll be right back. When is a car not a car? When it shows up in your dreams. Cars are one of the most common dream symbols. If you don't know why you're dreaming about cars or any image, it can leave you confused or scared. But that dream could be a solution to a pressing problem, or an insight into a solution that's been bugging you for years. Go to my website and sign up for a complimentary discovery session, and I'll help you understand why a dream is a terrible thing to waste. Go to thedreamcoach.net for more information.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, and welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're speaking with Dr. Greg Hammer about stress. Greg, one of the things that we have said is that stress does impede our immune system, which is so important right now. So aside from reducing stress, what else can we do to increase our immune system?
Well, I think we do things that are associated with stress reduction. I think this is all interrelated. That is, habits of having good health and well-being are mutually beneficial. So I think we can focus now on our sleep, exercise, and nutrition, for example. So extremely important to get enough sleep. And I think the current pandemic has led to anxiety that many of us experience just because of all the suffering all around us. And this sort of low-grade anxiety and stress does prevent us from sleeping well. So certainly many of us are experiencing sleep disturbances, but let's have good sleep hygiene. Let's get in our beds when we're ready to sleep. So if you're thinking about things you have to do the next day, make a list, do things that quiet your mind, and don't get in bed until you're ready to go to sleep, for example. Avoid eating late at night, for example. Avoid too much caffeine. Caffeine has a long half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. So if you have a strong cup of coffee in the morning, say at 8 o'clock in the morning, half of it is still circulating in your body at 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon. And then a quarter of it is still circulating in your body when you're getting ready to go to bed. So if you're sensitive to caffeine like I am, coffee and tea can be definitely factors that interfere with sleep. So try to minimize it and keep it early in the day. Don't drink coffee or tea in the afternoon if you're having difficulty sleeping. So there are other elements of good sleep hygiene, not being on your computer just before you go to sleep. So let's practice good sleep hygiene, set the stage for having a good night's sleep. Exercise, extremely important for stress reduction and also, I think, boosting our immune system. So a regular habit of exercising daily or almost every day is extremely beneficial. Now, a lot of people are used to going to the gym. Gyms may be closed now. Go for a power walk, ride your bicycle, which most of us are allowed to do. You can do resistance training in your home just with body weight. So without going into too much detail about that, I think a good exercise session for 20 or 30 minutes at least, almost on a daily basis, will help us de-stress and bolster our immunity. And the third factor is nutrition. So there's a lot of information out there about good nutrition. And I think that there's a tendency when we're stressed and we're not sleeping well and we have anxiety that we tend to eat so-called comfort foods that may be high in fat or foods that are high in sugar or very processed foods. So let's try to go back to basics and eat whole, colorful foods and have healthy eating habits. I think the emphasis on sleep, exercise, and nutrition now during the pandemic is at least as important as ever. And those basics, when practiced daily, certainly will increase our resilience and our physical and emotional strength and help our immune responses as well.
Good. It's interesting. Your advice about sleep is very similar to the advice that we give to promote dreaming. Because these are all the things that when you quiet your mind, you're more receptive and sleep better. When you sleep better, you're actually going through all the sleep cycles. So you're getting your REM cycle where we have dreams. And so yes, it's very, very good sense. One group that we usually don't think of as having to deal with stress are children. But as the pandemic continues, we're seeing a lot of frustration with kids. They're having to stay home with their parents. They're away from their friends and their activities. How can they reduce their stress?
Yes, you're very right, Debbie. Kids are taking online classes for school, which is extremely difficult for many kids. I think many of us would have difficulties sitting in front of a screen with everybody's face in little boxes around the perimeter and trying to focus on what's being taught, as well as the other things you mentioned about being isolated from their friends and so on. I think the two most important things I would emphasize to parents of kids of various ages would be, one, be open and honest and transparent about what's happening right now. In other words, I would recommend against trying to shield your children from what's happening with respect to the pandemic and out in the world, because obviously they know that things are not normal right now. And so I would be very transparent and open with them. Obviously, that's an age-dependent type of interaction, so different with a 3-year-old than a 12-year-old. But I think openness, honesty, transparency with respect to what's going on is especially important right now. And the second thing I would say is for we parents ourselves to try to reduce our own stress and be present and let go of our negativity bias, fear, anxiety, and so on, and try to be calm with our children in particular, because they're very sensitive to our state of mind, our emotions, our level of stress. So we can set an excellent example and make them feel safe and secure by being calm and present ourselves.
I want to turn back to the medical profession. When the pandemic started, we saw story after story of the doctors and nurses being called heroes, miracle workers. We saw them working long hours and literally risking their lives for their patients. So if that doesn't induce stress, I don't know what does. But now, on top of all that, there's this backlash with virus deniers out there claiming it's a hoax, even saying doctors are falsely putting COVID-19 as the cause of death on death certificates, so they're making the numbers go up. And doctors have even been getting death threats for challenging these claims. As a doctor yourself, how do you feel about all this going on now?
I'll tell you, Debbie, it goes to the A in GAIN, which is acceptance. I think, you and I are not going to change the way people behave for the most part. And I think we have to accept that there are some fringe elements out there, from deniers of the Apollo astronauts landing on the moon, for example, that was a hoax, or, a number of other even Holocaust deniers, which is absolutely horrendous thought. But I think that, we're not going to be able to change everybody's mind about their thoughts and what they think is going on right now. And I don't think that most physicians are particularly distracted by that. Obviously, if they're having some kind of physical threat, that might be a different story. I think that I'm hoping that that's pretty uncommon and rare. But in general, I think most of us are going about our business, and we are altruistic people and are doing our best to serve our patients and the community, and not so much distracted by those fringe elements as you discussed.
It is interesting, though, that this book does come out at a time when doctors are under an extraordinary amount of stress. What made you decide to write this book?
That's a good question, Debbie. Actually, I suppose in a way I sort of backed into it. I've been doing a lot of lectures around the U.S. and around the world on wellness for physicians, and as well as giving talks on my research and so on. I still have my day job at Stanford, but giving more talks about physician wellness, incorporating the GAIN principles into those talks when I discuss resilience. And that message just seemed to be so resonant with audiences. At the end of a talk, I might have 500 physicians in the audience, and doing a 3-minute GAIN meditation to finish the talk, just so resonant with the audience, and causing such a connection with people. So I had some sabbatical time. I wasn't going to leave the area because I got to keep my lab going, and how should I spend my sabbatical time? And it just kind of clicked that the arrows were all sort of pointing in the same direction at that point, just about a year ago. This would be a great thing to do in my sabbatical. I think it's great if we can try to reinvent ourselves every 5 or 10 years as well. And I had never written a book like this before. So it was really the culmination of a number of little channels, I think, that led me to devote myself to writing this book. And that was initiated well before the pandemic occurred. And it just so happens that you're right. I think it is a very timely message during this awful and very stressful time.
Well, I hope they do get to hear it. I can't believe this time has flown by. So I have time for just one last question. How can people find out more about you and the book?
People can go to my website, which is Greg Hammer, GregHammerMD.com, GregHammerMD.com, lowercase. And also on Facebook, if they just put Greg Hammer MD in the search window, they will be directed to my book and other links on the website there. The websites are works in progress. I'm new at this. I'm getting a little bit of help. And over time, there'll be more links to programs like yours, so people can watch them and listen to radio interviews and so on. So yes, those would be two of the ways. And also I'm on LinkedIn. So I would look forward to connecting with anybody who's listening and your wonderful audience.
And where can they get the book?
The book will be out on Amazon as an ebook or a paper version on Amazon.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Greg, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today.
Great pleasure being with you, Debbie. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. We've been speaking with Dr. Greg Hammer on how to ease stress. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.